Hey everyone, welcome to Honeycomb Manila. This is All Things Creative.
We did receive confirmation during our discussion with Kiddo that unfortunately some of the other cafe owners who we were hoping to speak to are not available anymore. Things have been changing very quickly here in Metro Manila, and they are all reeling and trying to deal with that. So unfortunately, Kiddo is one of only two cafe owners who will be speaking with today. The other one is, of course, Chanco of Yardstick Coffee. Andre is our collaborator in Let's Coffee, the talk show that we do for Daily Drink Magazine and Yardstick Coffee. And so we're calling in to Andre, who is now in Singapore with his loved ones there. So I'm going to dial in Andre now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Honeycomb Manila. My name is Cosio, and we've gathered today to discuss via remote because of social distancing the COVID-19 and novel coronavirus crisis that we find ourselves in, specifically how it's affecting the service industry and us in the coffee industry and as cafe owners, baristas, people on the front line who frankly go to work every day. We just spoke with Kiddo from El Union Coffee, and right now joining us from a significant amount of social distance is Chanco of Yardstick Coffee. Here's Andre. Welcome, Andre.
Hi, Kay. How are things in Manila?
I won't lie, it's very tense. It's very tense. People had a hard time getting to work today. There was we have stories of shoving and shouting at bus stations, bus stops. It's kind of crazy.
Isn't that the opposite of social distancing if people are kind of crowding in buses and trains? And
sorry, what did you say?
Because I've been seeing photos of people crowding in certain places, whether they're taking their temperature check or getting on a public transportation. Isn't that what we shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, it's really the opposite. I have a Facebook status message from a couple from like 2 days ago that checkpoints create choke points, right? And what you don't want is lots of people funneling into one place. It really gives you an image of what is going to happen, and it's kind of wild. Like we had the DILG secretary just go on CNN and say that they were expecting this to happen, that it would be unmanageable and that there would be, tons of people. So, it's kind of crazy. Like they knew it was going to happen, but they did it anyway. And then on top of that, everyone's, the blinders have been lifted, things that you don't notice before, people spitting and just coughing and touching stuff. You didn't see it before, you would block it out, but now you're hyper aware to it and everyone sees it and everyone's videoing it, and it's intense. It really is intense.
And what do you think should be done, at least at a leadership level now? Because it seems like I think that they're trying, and I think the intention is well, but
I do.
There doesn't seem to be a system to support.
I do agree. I think the intention is good. They intend to make people stay home by making it difficult for them to go to work. I think that there's, my personal opinion, not the opinion of the company or of anyone here at in Honeycomb or Double Dragon at that. Is that work is essential, right? It is something that people need to do for many reasons. Social interaction, despite the social distancing, it is important, but also people have to complete tasks so that they can get paid, to put it in a nutshell. Yeah. In the same way that the bus driver needs to drive the bus from one side of the city to the other so that people can get to work, all those people who get to work need to complete tasks so that society can continue to function. And kind of creating the bottleneck of only having certain travel times and travel hours increases the likelihood of crowds. Probably the better thing to do would be to have like a 3-shift schedule where we have daytime workers, we have mid-shift workers, and we have nighttime workers, which would distribute the transit times across a large, across the day, to keep from crowding. I think that's one solution. It's very difficult to implement. You need a lot of people to get on board. But I think the number one concern that we're facing is one of trust. People don't trust the government is the start. We've faced a lot of problems in the previous years, which I think is putting it lightly. Those problems are creating global political problems for us with things like the VFA. And so it's become difficult for people to look up to their leadership and trust and have faith. In the same way, the leadership doesn't trust the people. They've rolled out military, style checkpoints as opposed to friendly. Here's a QR code. Fill out a form. We'll scan your temperature. There's a low level of trust, and a lot of that comes from the fact that people are desperate. People are desperate to work, and a lot of people are on no work, no pay, and a lot of people are in a situation where, not counting the service industry, which actually requires hands and feet on the ground picking things up and bringing them around, a lot of jobs that could be done telecommute, there's no trust in the office place as well, where bosses don't trust their teams or their employees.
So like this seems like it's worse than a rainy day, but it's when things go bad, such as this time, is where we see if there are systems in place or there are systems not in place. And unfortunately, I think in the Philippines, we're seeing it break down.
We see countries that have been able to manage this well, and they've been preparing for 20 years. Like they know it's coming. You're in Singapore right now. I just came from Singapore. By no means is their management of the situation perfect, but you really do feel that the people have faith in their government. I heard it said,
and what you mentioned, what you mentioned as well is that they've been preparing it since the last epidemic.
I happened to be in the room with someone whose wife was on the SARS team in 2002, 2003, and he said right after they finished SARS, they started saving up and planning for what happens when this happens again, which means that they were financially ready. They had the protocols in place. Hong Kong has been very affected by the virus, but it really could have been much worse. They have efforts in place. I went to an exhibit in March of last year in which one was it? It was one of the government art spaces in Hong Kong, and they had an entire exhibit explaining what had happened with H1N1 and their solutions to it and what they're going to do the next time. And they were showing it to the public using art and creative means. So it's you see how preparation, it's easy to say that we should have prepared, right? And hindsight is 2020. But not to be overly political, but we did see our healthcare budget slashed drastically this year by billions and billions, and now we're seeing the effect.
And I think there are things that we can learn, best practices from how other countries have been responding, and the responses from different countries have been varied.
Yeah.
Although I don't, it's a copy and paste, right? I don't think it's a copy and paste.
It isn't. It isn't at all. Societies are different, and again, levels of trust are different. And we that's something that we're really facing, and we're forced to confront right now. Um, I've said this over and over. Frisking at the mall, right? People checking your bag at the mall. You go to other countries that, in theory, should have concerns like ours. I'm not talking about first world countries here. I'm talking about developing nations, and you can just walk right into a mall. But once you give that, up, it's very hard to get it back. So we're in a situation now where there's no trust with the consumer, where you have to frisk people going to the mall, and you have to check their bags to make sure that they don't have a hammer, without the trust that normal people don't walk around with hammers.
Yeah.
So I think,
Unfortunately, that's not built overnight or over a weekend.
I think that ultimately the thing that I'm seeking from all of this is faith in humanity. I think that this is a real opportunity for us to pull together and get things in order. Of course, in times of crisis, we look to our leaders, and in whatever small scale it is, in the cafes, in our industry that we're in, that comes down to the owners, to the cafe owners, to our head baristas, to our chefs. We saw yesterday Noma closed in Copenhagen. How that's one of the ways that they're dealing with it. But Rene Redzepi went on Instagram, made a video, and he said, those who have stayed open, the cafes and bakeries, please support them. They need you. So it's a little bit mixed. Well, not that mixed. Noma is clearly a place that you go for socializing, whereas a bakery and your average cafe is not. They are kind of cool ways of getting a staple and getting something that's important to your daily life. So on that note, where's Yardstick in all of this?
So it was tough, maybe because we have two lenses within the industry. So we have this wholesale part and we have the retail part, right?
Yeah.
So the wholesale part, I think we'll only feel, a few days later, but we're seeing signs of it slowing down. Retail was obviously the most obvious, being in Makati and CBD.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was kind of like we felt the impact right away.
You mean on Thursday and Friday?
Yep.
Okay.
Thursday was very evident.
We were just on with Kiddo, and he said they had a 90% sales hit.
And the more I ask around, that number seems to be common, like 50 to 80 to 90%. And I think that the response on our side is, how do we keep our staff active and with the company, not this week, but in the next coming weeks. I think we have more of like a midterm look into this.
So what are you guys doing?
So we did one shift for the cafe.
Which means you're open from
like 8 to 5.
Okay. So it's like a standard work day.
It is. So it applies to both the wholesale team and the cafe. But for the cafe, having one shift a day also means less contact between shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we're minimizing contact within the company, but at the same time, for those roles where you can work offsite, like maybe some of our marketing roles, some of our sales roles, we have told them to work from home.
Mm-hmm.
Wholesale operations still continue, and then we will fulfill those accordingly. Classes and workshops have been canceled, indefinitely postponed.
How do you see that? Do you foresee that those classes and workshops are things that will come back, given the amount of contact that goes on in those activities?
I believe so, but I was talking to my wife earlier, and I think with this situation, I think regardless of industry, we will kind of rethink how we do business in the future, right? We were supposed to launch free brewing at home classes effective this week.
Mm-hmm.
As part of that's why I called you the other day, trying to figure out. That was going to launch anyway. But it was more of we did not want it to be a response of what happened.
Yes.
So now we're trying to understand and frame it properly so that it's useful to those who need it, but at the same time, balancing the sensitivity of the situation. Yeah, so we kind of workshop the classes. I think it will come back, but maybe we will just have to rethink how it's executed in the future.
So maybe for some of the people who are watching this aren't watching it live or on the same day that we taped it, because of course we'll be putting it up on YouTube. We're right now just waiting for a press conference, and the DILG secretary was just on TV, as I said, saying that this is a nightmare and something you will need to take more drastic measures. The speculation that's going around is that we're facing a greater lockdown or a total lockdown with a work closure. Is this something that you guys have planned for? And if that's a situation, how do you think that the retail side of your business is going to be able to cope with this? And we can discuss wholesale later. But on the retail side, what's the plan?
Yeah, I think we are. So yeah, it has been discussed, like from a worst case doomsday scenario kind of planning. And fortunately or unfortunately, we are in the hospitality business, which means it takes kind of two to tango. So there's always a guest and there's always us. And so as a company, knowing that that's the case, we're trying our best to be able to retain staff, right? Whether it's trying to structure out if indeed a total lockdown happens, how do we retain staff after April 14 and moving forward, right? Because even if you look at the bigger companies around the world, from the Nomas and the Momofukus and the Blue Bottles, whenever they would announce closure, I think within their messaging, there was still a date as to which they will support staff until.
Yeah.
Because it's unrealistic, maybe to support staff longer than that, because at least for retail, it's a cash flow, money in, money out kind of business.
Yeah.
So knowing that that's the case, we're thinking of ways on how to be able to keep that in the medium long run. Because if they choose to look for jobs elsewhere, or we can't afford to pay them to keep them, then to restart once everything's okay is also cost.
Yes.
And our regulars are only as good as how long our staff has been with us. I think. Right. So yeah, I think the plan now is how do we retain, and plan A, B, C, D from there.
Yeah, I think that the greatest asset for any service business will always be those who are serving, right? It'll always be the staff. It'll always be the crew. And I use this as an example in another interview I did while I was in Singapore, where 11 Madison Park closed down for a month because they did a renovation, and they took their entire crew to the Hamptons, and they did a pop-up restaurant in a vacation home there, and they all lived there for 1 month. They took their entire crew to live in the Hamptons for a month. Now they are the best restaurant in the world, right? There's a lot of money in that business, but it was a recognition of how important their staff was to that business. I guarantee you that restaurant in the Hamptons lost money for them. Guarantee you. But in the long run, seeing how your team is valuable, I think as owners and operators and proprietors of these businesses, I think that's I don't think I should out of turn say that this is priority one for all of us, to make sure that that our staff is taken care of, and that we all have a future here, whatever it takes to survive.
And I agree, and maybe we're not the most accurate snapshot of it because we only have one shop. But I can imagine for the, like Blue Bottle has 71 stores in the U.S. and they're closing from today onwards. We have restaurant groups in Manila and all over the Philippines who have hundreds of staff. So I'm not sure how challenging that can be.
Well, it's mixed because organizations that are that big also have deeper contingency plans, right? But on the cafe scale, we're all nano as it is. Even our biggest roasters, right? Even our biggest roasting companies in the specialty industry in the Philippines are still operating on 5 to 7 kilo roasters, as opposed to these giant pro bats of 50 kilos, 75 kilos, right?
So the positive is we can still be nimble and agile, but downside is we might not have as much of a contingency as you guys.
Canceling cupping altogether. That's a big thing.
Yes, yeah. Internally, we have been adjusting to all these different procedures and systems because of what's been happening around the world, just in case this happens. And it indeed did happen in Manila. So I think we're kind of prepared, and whether at a hygiene level or at a operational level, I think we're okay.
Let's talk a bit about cupping. So there's a new SCA protocol on cupping where you use a spoon and a cup, and you spoon and you put it into your cup. Are you confident that system is sterile enough?
So it depends on how the virus is transmittable or transmitted.
Yeah.
And because of the ways that it's transmitted, I think the SCA protocol is not a foolproof solution, but it's a good enough step. I think any responsible organization, at least in the past week or two, have put out policies or announcements or changes. And I think SCA being the body that they are, apart from canceling and postponing some of their events, I think they did a good job of responding quickly enough with regards to how people cup coffees. Because I think as an industry, we cup coffees almost every day. And we also cup coffees with other people outside the company, very frequent. So I think with a shot glass and you transfer from a cupping spoon, I think it's a good solution, but it does not stop the virus from being transmitted within a cupping room. And it's also as good as the staff following it, right? So in Yardstick, when we first started with the new procedure, there was a bit of pushback from the team because it's troublesome and it's different from slurping from a spoon.
Yeah.
And I think my argument to the team was like if we don't have good practices internally, then it will affect how we cope with other people. So I think internally we just had to agree and follow, and that took a while. But I think one of the best things about social distancing and all these is it's not really about ourselves, but it's how we impact other people. And as long as the mindset is about other people and not ourselves, I think we will be more careful about our actions.
Yeah, I think thinking about other people is really kind of the heart of the matter here, right? Especially for those of us who are younger and stronger.
thinking about people who we may be asymptomatic and be passing on an undesirable virus to them. But also just being conscious of like where you are leaving your mark genetically, right? And I think for me, how we are leaving our mark for generations after us to observe what we did in this situation and how we solved it. I think being conscientious that we are writing the story in real time is important. And we'll all have a lot of time at home, and it's a good time for self-reflection and planning and understanding. I think that this virus is something that we are going to be dealing with for quite some time. We talk about a 1-month lockdown. We talk about a 14-day period, incubation period, 5 days to symptoms. But all of this lockdown really is a matter of flattening that curve and making sure that.
And it's great that you're kind of documenting it in your own way. Because I think, I mean, Calvin and ourselves and whoever we will speak to later, we're kind of the small pieces of the entire puzzle. Right? But I think it's good to put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we're discussing it really is because we're not alone. I think that's super important to remember, is that none of us are alone in this. There are other people who are in the same industry, in the same business. Whether you're a barista or you are an owner, it's important to see that we're all dealing with it and we're all trying our hardest. And we're all dealing with a bad hand, with limited information. But all of the intention is there. And in an absence of trust, we trust each other. And that's why it's important to listen to each other and create the opportunity to hear each other. And that's why we're doing this more than anything else. We did try to get some other cafe owners on the line today, to be honest. It's kind of come down to Yumi and Kiddo, which is kind of the expected suspects, I would say, of people who I could call. We did call a couple of other people, but to be honest, everyone's reeling and trying to deal with their staffs.
Which is, fair enough. I think everyone's. And I mean, with the news conference at 4, I think everyone's also kind of paying attention to see what the next move should be.
Yeah, it's just the reality of it's the reality of today, frankly. And literally of this day of March 16, 2020.
Yeah, I Raph was in a shop, right? And I think his message to me earlier was, he is the captain of the ship, so he wants to be there if the staff are there, which to me is great.
Yeah.
I wish I was in Manila to be in the shop, but unfortunately I had to fly out before the lockdown.
Yeah, understandably. Different people have different needs, and you have family. Your wife is obviously in Singapore. And this really is a time to value your family. I think for everyone, whether that means being with them or being away from them.
Correct. So like even yesterday we had a movie night with my parents. So I just had to be mindful about social distancing.
I told this to Kiddo, and I'll say it again because I think it's important. I think that we should all be grateful that our cafe teams are consist of young, strong people. And if we find ourselves in a situation where some of us get it, which is a reality that will happen, that it can be seen as a good thing that you got it while you were young, that during this day and age you happen to be young and strong,
and can develop an immunity for this. And once you're immune, you're a benefit to society that you can now help, and you can help other people.
Hmm. Hmm. I've never thought about it from that perspective, but that's definitely a positive way of looking at the snapshot of now.
A lot of people get it. That's a good thing. Well, it's not a good thing in that people get sick, but it's a good thing because the more people get it, the better resistance is built up societally. And the people who have recovered from it create a bubble around those who have not. And then, it also creates a situation where you need less vaccines.
Yes.
Right? So the manufacturing process of the vaccines becomes a bit more manageable. We can get back to normal, whatever that is. Whatever the new normal is, we can get back to it.
I agree. And I think the prerequisite to that is to have more people tested. And the test kits are just not as available with our country compared to others. Because if you look at South Korea, where kind of testing is mandatory and they're trying to test as much of the population as possible, like the graph skews differently from what we thought it would be. Like we thought people who are older might be affected, but because South Korea is testing more across the population, across the demographic, there were some people. I mean, if you see the graph, there are a lot of people who are in the 20 to 30-year-old bracket who are actually, I think, positive or just have mild symptoms of it. But this is we're seeing the deaths, which is maybe the older people, but there's also data that shows that the younger people might show mild symptoms of it.
All right.
I just hope that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, sorry. I mean, I just hope that the leadership in our country can be more transparent. So, for example, in Italy, it is already very clear that they said that you only have so many beds, you only have so much ICUs. Therefore, they need to turn away people who are above 80, unfortunately. But as much as that is bad news, it's still transparent.
Just tell us the truth, right?
Yeah.
All right. So in closing, Andre, do you have anything that do you have any advice that you'd give to other people in the coffee business, cafe owners, people working as baristas or back of house roasters, anything, just kind of entering this next 30 days or so of time?
I think I said it the other day. At least for consumers or customers or drinkers of coffee, which is at least for those which are still operational and open, I think support local businesses, whether it's to grab food or Food Panda, and tip when you can. And I think for business owners, I think we just need to as much as we need customers to survive, we need to think of our own staff and team first, and to think of contingency plans to be able to keep our team. I think, at least for business owners.
All right. Thank you, Andre. Thank you for joining us and taking the time to speak with us here in Manila. We wish you the best, both in your company and in your family. Our hearts go out to all that are involved in Yardstick, and as well as all of the customers of Yardstick.
Thanks, Keo, for organizing this and for the questions, and keep safe.
You too.
Keep healthy.
All right. Thank you, Andre.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Andre. All right. So a lot has changed in the couple of hours, in the minutes that we've been recording here in Honeycomb, Manila. A state of enhanced quarantine has been declared from the Office of the President. which I have no idea what that means, but I think it's safe to say that there isn't going to be work tomorrow, which is pretty intense. One day at a time. Please continue watching our Honeycomb channels. We actually have something special in store with Daily Drink Magazine. Kind of anticipating what's going down here. We've prepared a mini coffee film fest. They're all programs that you can watch on YouTube and Vimeo online for free during this period. And members of our staff have been busy watching these films, deciding if they're good or not, and making reviews. So we'll be releasing those reviews over the next couple of weeks. So please watch out for that. We'll be updating the website with all of our latest content over the next couple of days. And we're doing our best to support you and bring you new content. Before we leave today, we're going to shoot a bunch more content for the YouTube page. So don't be surprised if you see some new shoe unboxings and some other opening act episodes, which we're going to be taping yesterday and today. And those will be coming out regularly for you guys to enjoy and consume during this time when we are socially distant from one another. Again, thank you for watching. I do appreciate your follows. My name is Keo Kosha, at Keo Kosha on Instagram. And on Facebook, you can find Honeycomb at Honeycomb Manila or /Honeycomb Manila, at Daily Drink Magazine at Honeycomb Manila on Instagram. And please follow our other publications here at Honeycomb. That's at Next Action Phase on Instagram and at Ajima Mag on Instagram. Ajima is where we talk about the more literally creative acts such as street art, streetwear. We do have an interesting podcast coming up, so please do subscribe to our podcast feed. All things creative, made in Honeycomb Manila on whatever your podcast catcher is. I think we are going to be on Apple Podcasts very soon, but we are definitely on Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and you can also get the RSS feed on our website. All right, thank you very much for watching. Let's coffee. Peace.